Hey, everybody. Welcome to True Crime Paranormal with the Psychic Sisters. I'm Kristi Brower here with my co host, Katie Weaver. Hey, Katie.
Hello.
We are excited to be joining you tonight. We're saying tonight because that's when we're filming, but obviously today, because this is the final episode of our feature on Deorr Kunz, on the Deorr Kunz case. And we've promised to give a psychic analysis of what we have come up with, what we feel did happen to this child.
Mhm,
We've covered we've had two other episodes. So if
mhm.
you haven't seen the first two, definitely go watch them. The first is Deorr Kunz is still missing. And the second one is Can I Speak to an Adult? The Deorr
Uh-huh.
Kunz case. So in in the Deorr Kunz case,
And
in
I
the
called it
episode.
that because I just felt like as we were covering that angle and reporting on it, it was hard to see an adult inside, you
It
know?
really was. It really was. In that second episode, we talked to the four main players:
Yeah.
mom, dad, grandpa, and
Mhm.
grandpa's friend, who were all camping with the family.
Yeah.
And it's just a tornado of confusion
Yeah.
about what really happened and when it
Mhm.
happened. And you can't get a straight answer out of any of these people.
No.
And so, yeah, I really thought you very aptly named that because it was as though there was no adult to speak to. There was no responsible person there that could tell
Yeah.
you what happened there.
Yeah. Or would
Um,
tell you what
or
happened there.
would, yeah, probably
Yeah.
not so much could, but would. In the
Yeah.
first episode, Deorr Kunz is still missing. We did just kind of outline the story of how he went missing. He went missing on July 10th, 2015. So he has now been missing for 5 years. He was 2 years old at the time. Went missing from the Timber Creek
Mhm.
campground outside Leadore, Idaho.
Yeah.
And so we did talk, kind of about the scenario. We have visited the place where he went missing from,
Mhm.
which is very helpful when you're doing a psychic read on a situation. It helps a lot to be able to go there or have some
Yeah.
connection to the physical place.
Mhm.
I know you and I both, were very impacted by going to that place from
Mhm.
a rational standpoint and also from a psychic standpoint, just the energy
Mhm.
of it and what we picked up. And so, what we want to do in this episode is just give you our read. We've told you the story, we've given you the facts as we know them or as they have
Yeah.
been presented, as
Mhm.
however they are. And so now we want to talk about,
As much as we could. As you
yeah.
guys know, this case is yeah, a winding web that
Hmm.
there's a lot of misinformation. The interviews with the
It's
parents
just
were all
kind of a
so
tornado of bullshit, really. I mean,
yeah. We could have done a many-part series on this case. We chose not to because honestly, it's just giving more wings to all of the confusion that was spun up in this case intentionally, and we just didn't
yeah.
really want to be a part of it.
No, because the key is, where is Dior? What happened to him? Where is he? How
Mhm.
do the people who don't know what's happened to him get some closure? How does our community get some closure and move on? Because this is a case that is revisited regularly in the news and in our community because a 2-year-old baby went missing, and that's a horrifying thing to have no resolution after 5 years.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
So
for
we
sure.
want to share our theory. This
And
comes from.
we know you're not all going to resonate with what we have to say. We get it,
It is what it
especially
is.
locals.
Hmm.
You know, you guys, it is what it is. We've all lived it. You guys all had the theory. We all, went
Hmm.
through this case. If you're local to us, if you're not, then this doesn't apply to you probably. I know that you're not all going to like what we have to say, and that's
Hmm.
cool. You don't have to.
It's
You
okay.
don't have
That's
to.
just
All we can give you is what we're seeing.
right. We're just doing what we do. We
Hmm.
have read this case after really getting a very strong, clear feel for all the people involved, the situation itself, and
Hmm.
we do have what we've come up with is our psychic analysis of what's happened.
Yep.
So I think we'll just start with the theory behind what happened to this child, and that is, I guess,
Hmm.
not theory, but the reading behind what happened
Yeah.
to this child.
Hmm.
My sense of it is that while Vernal, his father, was working on his
Hmm.
pickup in the campground, that there was an accident. That this child was
Hmm.
hit by the vehicle. I feel an impact, and then I feel that energy of panic and fear
Mhm.
that we have seen around the parents. I do feel he was killed accidentally. I don't feel that there
Mhm.
was intent or malice,
No.
but what happened after certainly did have
Mhm.
intent and certainly does have malice because we still have a family and a community missing this child. My sense is that Deorr is buried and that he is buried out in the um, sagebrush quite a ways. I was feeling into this today to get a distance, and I feel that he's 5 miles from the campsite. It's 8 miles from
Mhm.
Ledor to the campsite. He's 5 miles from the campsite. I feel like he's about 3 miles from town out in the
Mhm.
sagebrush. And when you drive into this campsite, it is just fields of sagebrush as far as the eye can see. As
Yeah.
far as I can tell, there have only been searches about 2.5 miles radius. I do feel
Mhm.
that his body is buried under um under the sagebrush can be really big here. And I feel
Mhm.
like he was buried kind of underneath one to
Mhm.
cover up the digging.
Yeah.
I also feel that he will be found. I don't feel that he will be found because somebody's looking for him specifically, but that
No,
he
it'll be
will be found, that at some point those bones
that
will
that
turn up.
ground will be dug for some reason. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, or looking for someone else.
Yeah.
That he will be found. Yeah, I do. What do you wanna
Mhm.
add? I know that's just kind of broad. We can get into the more specific
Mhm.
details, but what do you wanna add?
Well, and that'll be interesting because, uh, cadaver dogs can only smell decomp for a couple of years.
Right.
When decomp has continued or, completed, and so cadaver dogs at this point out there would be likely useless because
Mhm.
there's nothing to smell now for
I'm looking
them,
at bones at this point.
depending on how fast decomp happened. I mean, that's all. Nothing I can, say definitively except for that we've kind of already gotten past that window. So
Yeah.
it'll be interesting to see how, or when those bones are uncovered. But I agree with that. A few things to note. I feel like when this happened, I do feel like he died immediately,
Mhm.
died instantly, and uh, that mom and dad panicked. And I actually feel like uh, the dad was kind of the one that went, we aren't telling anybody about this. He had some sense that he was going to go to jail over
Mhm.
it. And he I feel like mom was so shocked and so scared that she didn't have a clue what
Yeah.
to do. I feel like grandpa was I do feel like grandpa knew. I do.
Yeah. I
I
do too.
have this kind of chilling vision of him saying, well, you better not tell anybody or you're going to be in trouble, and
Yeah.
kind of steer that ship. So I feel like it was Vernal and Grandpa that kind of put that seed in Jessica that we can't tell anybody what happened,
Yeah.
or blah blah blah. And
Mm.
I feel like it was unrealistic, to think that they would really be in that much trouble or whatever. It was very paranoid, which also makes me wonder again what kind of substances were being used out there.
Mm.
We know there was some drinking, but was it more than that? Because she feels really paranoid to me
Yeah.
about it.
Yeah.
Now, what we've seen since is what we saw there was a grieving mother, you
Yeah.
know? I think that they had no idea that this would turn into what it did.
Right.
I think they thought that law enforcement would come, we'd fan out, we'd look, we wouldn't be able to find him, and that would kind of be the end of it. I don't think they realized that the community would rally like they did, that so
Mhm.
many people would be coming and looking, that things would be the way they were. I
Yeah.
really don't. I don't feel like they had any idea what this was going to turn into. This
No.
was a really stupid decision in the moment instead of just owning up to what happened.
Yeah.
But I think that what we saw from Jessica after that was a grieving mother,
Mhm.
and she knew her baby was dead, but everything blew up so fast that
Yeah.
they didn't feel like they could fix it. And their
And how do you
parents,
go back on that? How do you
right.
How do you go
and their
about that?
parents jumped up and defended the hell out of them and went to bat for them, and,
Yes.
my hell, Vernal and his dad have sued the private detective 3 times now, and that's dad that's steering that ship because he's still defending the honor of his kid,
Right.
because I do feel
Right.
like their families believed them. They, wanted to believe them, of course.
Right.
Did anyone kill
No,
this little guy intentionally? I don't believe that's true. But
no,
do
I
they know
don't
what
either.
happened to him, and was there an accident? I absolutely believe that's true.
Yeah, I do too, but there was no intent behind it. One of the things that really struck me was the
Mhm,
the frenzy that happened when he went missing, and
mhm.
not saying that you wouldn't, be panicked when your child is missing,
Yeah.
but it was even less rational than I think that they should have been, and that was one thing that I really worked on in
Mhm.
reading the situation was why that level of panic, and why were they calling 911 in separate locations at separate times, and
Mhm.
why did Vernal keep leaving and coming back and leaving and coming back, and there were a lot of things that really made me question, like, I don't feel like the energy around it was the same as if
Mhm.
it had been they were looking for him.
Yeah.
They weren't looking for him. They already knew what had happened, and they were horrendously panicked and
Mhm.
freaking out about how they were gonna handle this.
Yeah.
And I also feel there was some disagreement about how to handle it. I feel like that's
Uh-huh.
why there were 2 911 calls,
Uh-huh.
is that they were both, sort of went to their own corners. Dad took off for a little while. Everyone's freaked out and upset. Well, almost everyone, not Reinhardt, because
Right.
he didn't know. I
No.
feel like he knew something happened, but he didn't really know what happened, and they just kept him in the dark. I do feel like there
Mm,
was, he was off doing his own thing, and they didn't tell him the whole story.
no.
I do feel they manipulated him a little bit,
Oh,
but
yeah.
I feel like, he wasn't part of covering this up.
No.
I feel like he
No.
genuinely didn't know for sure what had happened
Mhm.
and really didn't wanna be involved.
Agreed.
But the other 3, grandpa and mom and dad, I do feel that they conspired, and then
Mhm.
they didn't necessarily agree, and there was a lot of panicking, and
Mhm.
that's why things happened the way that they did. It just was handled so strangely, and
Mhm.
so many versions of what happened. Well, of course, there are so many versions of what happened because they've never actually told the truth
Right.
about what happened, and so the story morphs and changes o over time because
Mhm.
they're telling it's a tale. It
Right.
didn't happen to begin with, and that's why they can't remember the exact details about who
Mhm.
did what, when, and where everyone was because
Mhm.
they're making it up.
Yeah. Yeah, and they'll glom on to something that somebody said that feels right, and they'll kinda keep pounding that,
Yeah,
but, things like, for Vernal especially, all of the stuff he said about what happened when they were in Ledward that day.
yeah,
Everybody who should have seen the baby, the delivery driver, the redheaded woman that he had a 45-minute conversation with, blah, blah, blah. None of those things actually happened, or the creep with the Jeep or all of that nonsense. None of
no,
that happened, but once he said it once, it felt true. It felt good,
mhm,
so he just
mhm.
kept saying it. So then, of course, then I think Jessica tried to start saying it too because it felt like something that was believable.
That could potentially have happened. Yeah,
Mhm.
I feel that, baby Deorr was dead before they ever took that trip into town.
Oh,
I
yeah.
do not feel he was with them. I do not feel that they will ever find anyone with that witnessed that child being in town during that trip.
No.
He
No,
was
because he
already
wasn't there.
gone. He was already
Mhm.
buried at that point.
Mhm. Yep, agreed. Agreed. And yeah, it is a really sad case. I think it's also
It
just
is.
a really a good example of what happens when people make really hasty, desperate, paranoid decisions
Yeah,
and then can't back off. I mean, this case got so public so fast.
yeah.
At one point, the detective, Klein, the Klein agency had said,
Mhm.
"Jessica knows where he's buried. She has said to us that she knows where he's buried," and then immediately backed off of it.
Yeah.
And, I feel like that's true. There's
Mhm.
no
I do too.
transcripts of that, and so everybody has, they've been a little skeptical of it. I don't think he lied about that. I
No,
feel
I
like
don't
she
either.
did say that.
Yeah.
She did say that, because she does know, you
There's
know?
such a desperation around all of it
Mhm.
that, to me, feels like still even now, 5 years later, they're not sure if they did the right thing. How can they ever get out of this?
Right.
they will forever be the parents of the missing baby that never is found, I mean,
Oh, and the
and I
public
do.
won't let it the public
No,
won't let
because
it
the
go away.
public doesn't let it go.
Mm-mm.
And how do they come back now after
Mhm,
5 years of investigation,
mhm.
huge amounts of money donated, huge amounts of money spent,
Yeah.
all this time, all the energy behind the community support, as well as
Mhm,
law enforcement and
mhm.
the private investigators? How can they ever go back on their story now,
Yeah,
you know?
yeah, totally. I mean, there's just that's how I feel as well. I think grandpa just kinda said, "Tell me what you're gonna say," you know?
Mhm.
And that's just kind of the route he took.
Yeah.
I have a really hard time understanding that, but I didn't know him as a person.
No, and I do feel like there's a very, strong distrust of the police and law enforcement
Mhm,
around all of this,
mhm,
and that there were other things that were going on in the lives of this family
mhm.
that they didn't want attention placed on them
Yep,
for.
yep,
I do feel like there's other criminal activity, I do feel there's drugs at the time, drugs involved,
mhm,
and other things that they didn't want
yeah.
scrutiny,
Well, on Jessica's part, she already had given up custody of her 2 other children,
right?
and she did see them, though. I mean, it wasn't like she'd just completely thrown her kids away. There were some news reports that said that, but actually on a deeper dive, I discovered that that really wasn't true at all. She still had
Mhm.
contact with her kids, but I feel like one of the things that was said to her was that, "You won't be seeing your kids anymore. They'll take them away. You'll lose all custody,
Yeah,
when they know that this is what you let happen to your baby."
yeah,
I feel like for her, that was one of her driving factors is that she didn't just lose, the little guy that had died, but she was feeling threatened that maybe she would lose everything, you know?
yeah, yeah, that
And
fear of losing everything, I feel like, drove all of this.
mhm, yep. I feel like Vernal was absolutely the key player. This was about protecting him, and it was about his paranoia and weirdness about just being honest and telling the truth, and
And just fear, absolute
yeah,
fear.
total fear. Yeah, fear and some really bad decisions that rolled into so many more bad decisions and,
Yeah.
that landed us here.
Right, that landed us in a past the point of no return situation,
Yeah.
in which how do they ever go back on their story now, you
Mhm.
know?
Mhm.
I feel like it's really sad, but one of the things that I guess brought me at least some comfort in it, in reading this, was that I don't feel any intent behind it. Nobody
No,
killed this little boy on purpose. It was an
no.
accident. This
Mhm.
was not intentional. He was not kidnapped. He was also
No,
not neglected and left to just wander off into the woods and be eaten by an animal. That didn't happen.
no,
Neither did a drowning. None of those things resonate with me at all. This was an
no.
accidental injury.
They're not monsters, they just made a
No.
horrible decision, and you know what?
Mhm.
Unfortunately, sometimes children are killed in accidents. I mean, it's a horrible thing, but
But it
it's
does
true.
happen.
Yeah, it's true. People make a bad decision or a kid gets where they're not supposed to be or whatever. They just typically don't make this decision. But
Right.
yeah, but they're not terrible people. They've made some
Mhm.
really bad decisions here in
And I
desperation
don't feel like
here.
they even were bad parents, but at this
No, I don't
point,
either.
the child is gone.
Yeah.
There's nothing they can do to bring him back, and so they went into protect mode, they went into panic mode
Mhm.
to protect themselves.
Well, and the hard part now is that if the day comes that those bones are overturned, and found, which we really do anticipate they will be at some point,
Mhm.
that will be the point of no return for these 2 that
Well, yeah.
they really will lose everything, you
Mm.
know? Yeah.
Yeah, that's really, really unfortunate because it didn't have to go this way.
No.
It really didn't, but in that moment, I mean, it shows you how one decision can
Yeah.
change your whole life, for better or
Mhm.
worse. And this is certainly a great example of that,
Yeah.
and I feel whenever I feel into either of them, Jessica or Vernal, there is this sick feeling in the pit of my stomach
Mhm.
that I just feel like they live with this every day.
Yeah.
Every day. This never goes away.
No. Well, and their decisions afterwards, they split up, not
Mm,
too long after, Deorr was reported missing, and then he took a job as a long haul truck driver, kind of just getting the hell out of here. And she remarried in a
Yeah.
flash. She remarried in such a quick and strange way that her mother wasn't even at the wedding, you know?
Yeah.
Sh Both of them
Certainly an
trying
attempt
find
to
some
try to
way
move
to move
on.
on. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, Maybe 6 months after this happened, someone that I know knew her mom and had told me, "She can't eat, she can't sleep, she's lost a ton of weight, she's an absolute wreck." Well, she was
Right.
a grieving mother who couldn't openly grieve because there was the charade going on that we didn't know what happened to him. We didn't know. Maybe he was kidnapped and he was alive. And, it was like
Mhm.
she couldn't really and had still not been able to properly grieve the death of her son.
Right.
The other thing that I was told at that point was that the community people were very convinced that they did it. People were convinced that they did it. The clues were there. I mean, there are a lot of
Mhm.
things you look at this case, you go, duh,
Right.
but, the public reacted the way the public does, which is, to send a lot of threatening stuff, and there
Yeah.
wasn't a day that went by for a long time that Jessica wasn't getting death threats from
Yeah.
people, and she was really, really freaked out and really afraid, and unfortunately, I feel like that kind of behavior from the public
Yeah.
is part of the reason why this case has never gotten to light because
Yeah.
people decided to do that stuff, and I do think that that's part of the reason why maybe at some point she could have or would have come forward and told the truth, but,
Yeah.
because of the way she was threatened constantly and frightened and attacked, I feel like that the people who chose to do things like that did an enormous disservice to this case.
Mhm. Well, it was, just proving the point that was made to them initially, which is this was gonna ruin your life and take everything away from you.
Yeah.
And certainly living with that, daily onslaught of threat is
Mhm.
part of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, had they been clean about it, had they just called the sheriff, had they just been real about it, would things have gone down differently? Well, yeah, 100%, 100%.
Mhm.
Would someone have done time? I don't know. I mean, that really depends on what the sheriff found when they came out there.
Right.
Accidents do happen,
They
you
do.
know? And yet again, we really suspected that there was maybe some substance abuse involved here, some things that would have not shown, kindly on them. And so it's
Yeah.
hard to say that for sure, but it's really sad the way this went down.
Mhm. It is. It is.
Starting with the loss of life, obviously,
Yeah,
I mean,
it's
a
definitely.
two-year-old life bright light was snuffed out, due to some carelessness or some kind of accident with the truck that I mean, that's sad enough,
It
sad
is.
enough for
It
his
is, but then to
family, but
add all of this on top of and all the stories and the accusations and the everything, it blew so out of control.
yeah,
Yeah, but I don't know. I mean, it made me feel good to at least determine that nobody killed this baby on purpose,
no,
you know? And certainly, we can look at the behavior of the parents after the fact and go, "Okay, yeah, there've definitely been some poor choices here." They didn't
yeah,
kill their child intentionally.
no.
No, and they now live with this for the rest of their lives,
They
whether
have,
they are
however
ever brought to justice on it or not. I mean,
right,
the punishment is there and real every day.
absolutely. They have wasted an enormous amount of resources and time
My gosh,
from so
it's
many different
unbelievable.
agencies and so much money that was donated from the community to help find this kid. I mean, those things you can't roll back the clock on that. Those things happened and there's
Yeah,
nothing that can be done. But
yeah.
you know what? We do it again.
Mhm.
Because that's how a lot of times in this community, that's how we roll, right? And we do it
Right.
again. But
Yeah,
hopefully the next time someone finds themselves in a situation like this, they'll just decide to be honest and be real and not put themselves or the entire community in this kind of a position.
absolutely, absolutely. I think that, there is a lesson in this
Yeah.
because really, whatever the consequences would have been had they reported it honestly, they were not worse than what they live with every day now. There
No,
is no way that they're
no.
worse than what they live with every day now.
Nope. They just didn't know because this decision came to be and it snowballed so fast there was no way to stop. Well, there was a way to stop. I'm not going to say that. There was a way
Mhm.
to stop. But
They certainly had plenty of opportunities to
mhm,
back it up and tell their story. And they, when they were named persons of interest and, I mean, they had a lot of opportunities that they didn't take.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
that's
definitely.
unfortunate.
It is. Yep. So there it is.
Yeah. That's what we have to say. Of course, we welcome your comments. As always, you will agree or disagree, and that's fine.
I know.
Um,
Be nice or don't. I mean,
whatever, we do what we do, and if you like it, great, and if you don't, that's okay too.
yeah.
One question that's come up for us is why do we present all the facts in a case before we do a read on it? Well, because that's an important part and an important element of reading a case
Mhm.
is to have the basic facts. The point of the reading is to give you the outcome, which is the unknown.
Mhm.
But going there, listening to the interviews, getting a feel for the people involved, that's all a part of reading the case.
Mhm. Yeah.
You see some people do a cold read, and that's fine, and we do some
Mhm.
cold reads, but
Mhm.
that's not the only way to do a psychic reading. There
No.
are lots of ways, and one of them is to take into consideration all of the elements and the energy behind them because it's very, very important
Mhm.
to have a connection to the place, to the people involved, to really feel into what has happened. And
Mhm.
that's how we work, Not everybody works that way, and that's okay. But, it turns out that there are lots of different ways to read something,
Mhm.
and, this is our way.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. And if that doesn't work, that's okay. If it doesn't
mhm,
work for you, that's okay. But it is our way, partly because true crime paranormal for us is reporting the true crime
yeah,
as well as doing the cold read. We want to
we
report
want
the
both
whole thing.
elements. Yeah,
You know? And some of you guys listen to us because you wanna hear the crime part. You could care less about the psychic analysis, and that's okay. And
yeah,
some of you really wanna hear the psychic analysis, and that's great.
mhm.
It's fine. I guess we're feeling a little salty. I guess it's just true. We got some
Just a
really
little.
mean freaking comments this week, and we're both trying to get a thicker skin and realize
Mhm.
that, scroll and roll or maybe just don't read the comments or just get
Yeah,
over yourselves. But
yeah.
we've both been a little burned this week, so we're trying to, yeah, we're gonna suck it up.
We are. We are. And I do think that it's important to explain sometimes what we do and what our process is because
Yeah,
there are lots of misconceptions about what it means to be a professional psychic. There are lots of misconceptions
yeah.
about what it means to do a psychic reading. There is not just one way, there are many
No,
ways.
many ways.
This is our way.
Yep.
And the elements do matter. They do. And they
Mhm,
certainly give me a clearer picture of the energy around the situation and the
mhm.
scenario. And that's important. Plus, I
Absolutely.
wanna share the story. I want to be able to share the story with all of you because
Yeah.
that is important as well. We
Mhm.
wanted to meld a true crime show with a psychic read show, and that's what we're doing.
Yep.
So, we appreciate
So that's
all of
how it
you
is.
being here and listening and participating for whatever portion you're here for. We appreciate that.
Sorry for our little rant. Yep.
Yeah. Well, I think it's important to explain from time to time, though, because
Yeah.
you and I both know, having worked in this field for more than a decade,
Mhm.
that there are a lot of misconceptions,
Oh,
and there
yeah.
are a lot of beliefs that there's just one certain way you do this, and it's not
Mhm.
true, that there are
No,
many
not at all.
ways, and there are many kinds of intuition and lots of different factors, and so this
Mhm.
is who we are, this is what we do.
Yeah. Yep, for sure.
Yeah.
So
Well,
there it is.
there it is. So that is the end of our series on Deorr Kunz. We hope
Yeah.
that you, appreciated it. We hope that it was informative. I know for some people it was difficult to listen to.
Yeah.
Nobody likes telling a story of a two-year-old that goes missing. N
No.
We didn't either. This story has been tough for us to cover.
It's been
We
real
at
tough.
times are like, "Why are we doing this case? This is really awful," but
Yeah.
it's important too, and it's
Mhm.
local to us, and we feel like covering our local cases really matters
Yeah.
because of our perspective, and so, we will continue to do that. We have some other local, cases coming up that we will share along with some not so local to us
Yep.
cases coming up.
Yep.
Yeah.
As always, there's more crime.
Oh, well, that never ends, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank
Alright.
you for joining us. You've been listening to True Crime Paranormal with the Psychic Sisters, and we will be back soon with another story. Have a great night.
We will. Alright. Bye, guys. Take care.